All right, recording is on.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to an order of the Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan Update Committee for the Lewis and Clark Olney Woluski Planning Area on September 26, 2019. And I'd like to do a roll call here.
Oh, okay.
Well, I should.
David Conlon,
I'm here.
Adriana Barola,
Here.
Paula View,
Here.
Mike Magyar,
Here.
James Neckett. And I'm Gail Hendrickson, Community Development Director.
Okay, do we need to stand up and do a pledge of allegiance, or is that only for our county meetings?
That's only for the planning.
Sounds good. All right.
Do you want to have the other two attendees introduce
Yes.
themselves?
Can we have the attendees of the general public introduce themselves?
Victoria Sage. I'm Pamela Webb, County Commissioner, District 3.
All right, sounds good. Let's see here.
Oh my God, that cheese is wonderful.
Let's get to the review of the August 22nd, 2019 meeting summary. And do we need to accept this as a meeting summary?
Not officially.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? I know that we just got this. I skimmed through it. It brought back a lot of fond memories.
So we don't need to officially, cool.
Yeah. So I think it looks great, and I appreciate whoever it is transcribed this and wrote this out. I know
That was Julia.
that's a lot of work. So that's a great record, and we all appreciate Julia's help, even though she's out sick, or?
She's on vacation.
Oh, well, I don't feel so bad then. All right. Let's see here. The report from the County-Wide CAC Liaison. That would be Jim. Do you have a report? Do you have a report to write or to talk about?
Well, it was an interesting meeting for me in that the agriculture aspect, I got educated, but other than that, I don't have a lot to say. I like being educated.
What did you learn?
It's like the most surprising thing that you learned, that you're like, wow, I didn't know that.
But I have to get used to the lovely smell of rotten cow manure.
Okay.
It's not going anywhere?
All right.
Not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
The
You
smell
live
of my
near a dairy?
childhood.
Oh,
No government.
yeah, nothing you can do about that.
Make any rules upon you.
Something can be done about it.
Just stop drinking milk or consuming dairy products, and it'll drive the demand for that right down to nothing.
Right.
Right after this conversation about the cheese.
Yeah, which I'm not going to be part of that.
I like milk products.
I'm not going to get on
I
that
just,
team.
I would,
Well,
that's
that's French cow
Yeah. Oh, okay.
smell,
That's French.
so
Okay.
we're outsourcing it.
All right.
And
Well,
just to follow up on Jim's report, so the Soil and Water Conservation District gave a presentation to the County-Wide CAC last week, and she talked quite a bit about the work that they do, and so that took up quite a bit of the time. So
Okay.
CAC, the County-Wide, didn't really get too much into their discussion of Goal 3, and then next month we'll have the Forest Practices Act workshop in lieu of the CAC meeting. So in November, they'll go back and start talking about Goal 3. So there'll be
Okay.
a lot more discussion on it.
is Chris on the Soil and Water Conservation District? He ran for that, and he was right. Okay, he was actually elected. That's fabulous.
I'm also on it. You are.
I didn't know that.
Nice.
You're elected to the...
No, I'm the
You're the
liaison for the
liaison.
ward.
Okay. Did you like the Soil and Water Conservation District stuff?
Yeah, again, it was new to me. It wasn't something I've had to deal with in my professional life at all.
Are those the dike people?
No,
Don't call them that.
no, they do a lot of wetland restoration.
Sorry, the raised earthen berm people.
They're not the dike people.
We knew what you meant.
But I think their presentation is on the County-Wide CAC website. So if you're interested, her PowerPoint slides are up there.
Okay.
Awesome.
So when's the next meeting?
The next County-Wide CAC will be in November, which will be November,
And Andrea, you're on the
I'm on the team.
for that.
November
What's the baseball
21st.
analogy? You're in the batter's
I'm
box?
I'm on deck,
No, on deck.
yes,
Okay.
November 21st.
countywide.
You got that
You
written down?
will email me a reminder probably, because you're really
Yeah.
good at that. Awesome. Keeps me.
Were we going to go back and forth, or were we going to try to run through everybody on that? I can't remember what we said.
I think you two were.
We're
gonna
kind of
split-
going back and
You guys
forth.
going to tag team it? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think more than one person from, like, the first one we were both at, which was kind of great. I like more than one person being at those, because there's a lot of information to, like, try to soak in and to relay.
Mm-hmm.
But also, not everybody needs to spend their time doing that if they have other things to do.
Right.
So,
Okay.
The great thing about the, these goal explanation meetings, I think, is that they are, if enough people go, we will have created a lot of people with good knowledge of the land use system in Oregon, which we really, really need. And because so much of our public discussion of land use is in urban areas, the average citizen doesn't pick up the rural components of land use planning. And I think they're wonderful. I mean, I've been a land use planner in Oregon for 30 years, and I learned something at every one of these. I think they're very rich. So I recommend, I mean, I know I'm a planning nerd, but I really do recommend them highly. I really do. They're really very educational.
and so you said October, they're continuing basically the ag and, was it farming and agriculture, ag forestry?
Yeah, so what'll happen is you should have one of these Forest Practices Act flyers.
I do.
Yeah, so instead of having a countywide CAC meeting at their regular time on the 17th of October, because they're so far ahead of all the planning groups, we're going to give them a month break, and instead we're going to do this Forest Practices Workshop.
What date again?
October 17th at 3 p.m. And did you pick up a brochure?
I didn't, but I have an ODF meeting that day. You didn't have to do that, Gail. Thank you, my dear.
You're welcome.
Oh, shoot.
Is it going to be recorded like the,
There will, because it's in room 430 at the,
Oh,
that's
right.
the only room that was available. The library was booked, the Boynton was booked, all the rooms at the college were booked. So we've got room 430. So there will be an audio recording, but no video, unless I can see if IT can hook up a video system.
Okay.
Cool.
So let's talk about the goal to overview.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I already had this meeting in my calendar. I just didn't recognize what it was. Which is very common for me. Sorry,
Gail,
Mike.
would you like to dive into the goal 2 overview?
Sure. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Goal 2 because I think most of us were at the July 31st meeting where Lisa Phipps talked about it. And Goal 2 doesn't really have any specific policies. It's a framework for how we in the county are going to do land use planning. And it spells out certain requirements that we have to meet. It details where we are taking exceptions to goals in order to accommodate different types of existing development that wouldn't be consistent with a particular goal. And you'll notice that in the materials you got for this meeting today, about half of the county's goal is just nothing but a list of tax lot numbers. And those are all the properties that are included in the goal exception areas throughout the county. So A lot of that doesn't need to be in the comp plan. It could be kept administratively and just shorten that up. But what I really wanted to focus on in my presentation tonight was just, I gave you all this little PowerPoint thing that I put together. So in addition to the fact that we have to do land use planning, that there's a structure for it that's handed down to us by the state, and we already have a lot of that framework in place since 1980. What we really need to focus on is where we think the county is going to go in the next 20 years and how these trends, demographic, are going to play out. How does climate change play into it? So I pulled different things from the materials that you had. This is all in the big set of materials that you have for today's meeting, but this kind of just pulls out the specific pieces. So the Population Research Center is predicting that between 2010 or 2017 and 2067, that Clatsop County overall will probably grow by about 2% growth rate, but the unincorporated area is actually going to shrink down a bit. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Part of it might be due to aging of population. The county average age itself is just getting older as time goes on. Part of it is that the cities are going to grow, and they're going to take in land from the unincorporated areas into their growth boundaries and then eventually annex that land. So that automatically decreases our population. You know, some of it just may be out-migration. If we don't have jobs to keep people here in the county, people are going to go to where the jobs are. So, and I have too many planning areas in my head, but I don't know if it was here or Northeast where they were talking about the trends where, you know, you see a lot of young people moving out after high school, college, to go to college, and then spending some time out in the real world, and then, you know, eventually deciding to come back and raise families and come back to the county here. So, again, just looking at it right now, let's see, so in 2010, I'll just go together here. So 2017, we were looking at, I'm not reading. Yes, okay, sorry, I'm reading the wrong way. So in 2017, we're looking at about 25% of our population that's going to be older than 65. By the time we get to 2035, which is just 5 years short of our planning time frame we're looking at almost 30% of the county being over age 65. And that doesn't change much then, really over the next 30 years as far as they can tell. So looking out to 2067, there's not much change. And that's been fairly steady throughout time over the years, but it is kind of inching up in terms of the average age. So when we think about housing needs or transportation, you know, we have to think then we need to plan as well for an aging population. And so where are you going to put services? Where are you going to put housing? What are you going to do about transportation? Are there different recreational needs that people will have based on age? We just have different abilities at different age levels. And then just in terms of housing, this information is pulled from the housing study, and I think I sent that out to everybody. Maybe I just sent it to the Planning Commission.
I thought it was just the Planning
Yeah,
Commission.
so if I haven't sent it out, you will be getting it.
I would love that.
You
So-
would love it.
I would love it.
It's very interesting, actually.
Yeah.
I love
And
that
it is on
sort of
our
thing.
website as well, so I'll send out a link.
Okay.
So according to the housing study, whether you agree with all its recommendations or not, what they are telling us, the consultants are telling us that based on their research, we have an adequate supply of housing to support our needs for the next 20 years. And that's what we're looking at, is what is our housing supply need for 20 years. So we have the land, we have the housing stock. What we're missing is the price point. And Mike and I were talking about this before the meeting, is that $350,000 is not the price point that's going to put people in houses in this county, or at least people who live and work in this county into houses. It will put people into houses in this county, but they will probably not be full-time residents. So that's one thing to think about. So it's not a matter of just building more houses. We have to think about the price point and then what influences those price points. So you have infrastructure costs, water, sewer, if you're in one of those areas, or septic and well. and then the maintenance that goes along with that, pumping out a septic tank, keeping your well clean, making sure that if you have to build a road to get to your parcels, that's money, and I'm sure Jim can tell you figures of how much all of these things cost. And do we really want to encourage more dense housing in the rural areas, or should that really be put into the incorporated areas where they already have existing services? And that does bring your price point down, because at that point, you're not paying to put in new roads, put in new water lines, put in new sewer lines necessarily. You can tap into what's already in place. So those are things to also keep in mind. How does housing and affordability and trying to keep the county rural all fit together? And house size, we get a lot of inquiries, I think, about tiny homes or can we live in an RV? And I think this was a group that talked about this. Yeah.
I don't know I've had to email you a lot of questions about that, just because I have a lot of buyers that have enough to maybe buy a little piece of land and want to live in an RV on it, and we can't. We can't. It's oh God, I have so many thoughts.
Well, it seems to me
An
it's
interesting thing on that. I don't understand why it's against policy as long as you have the proper utilities. I mean, I can understand because of the NIMBY effect, but I don't understand what the difference is if somebody's living in a trailer or whatever, as long as they've got power, water, and sewer. I mean, I don't understand why we have this 30-day rule and everything else if you're meeting all the health and safety issues of the state of Oregon. But that's one of our policies now, and that's probably something somebody should talk about in the long run, because you're not going to have any more of an affordable housing than a quote-unquote temporary housing.
Right.
That people can work their way up the ladder. And that's what most people that have the intent of that is that they want to buy the piece of property, pay for it, live in a trailer or whatever it is on the property properly, and then build a house 5 or 6 years down the road. So that's my spiel on the whole thing.
Paula, you were going to say something?
Well, it seems to, we've lived out here 12 years in Lewis and Clark. We moved back to Astoria in 1999. And we know all the changes that, we've seen, which seem like a long time, but look at how fast 10 years has gone. And it seems to me, and I work at the museum, and there's just a lot of variety of people in the area, whether they work at Fort George or Bowie Beer or the museum or any number of places throughout the county. But millennials are never going to go out and buy $350,000 homes or even $200,000 unless it's maybe they're going to share with mom and dad or whatever they're going to do, but they're not going to buy a 3,000 square foot house. That's just, they don't want something that big. They don't want to take care of it. For one thing, they don't want to pay the taxes. That's not, even if they had the money to do it, could afford it, that's not what they would do. Then you have, and I've seen this at the museum, we probably have 7 employees that have moved up from California over the last 10 to 15 years, escaping either LA or Monterey, some fires, some whatever, and they can afford to buy, a $200,000 or $300,000 home easily, and probably pay cash for it. And if it's a fixer-up, they'll fix it up and call it good, and they're able to live here. And then you have the ones that, like you say, we're aging out, so we need assisted living, we need retirement living, and that goes with the transportation issue of, if I don't want to drive anymore, can't drive anymore, where is a bus going to take me? Where are they not going? All of those kinds of things, and things we probably never thought about many years ago. But
I probably get one phone call a week as a realtor of someone, typically an older person, wanting to be able to retire here and their price range of what they're comfortable with is around 150 or under two max, and it's impossible, and I can't help them. And they're like, my family's all there, my grandkids, I want to be close to my family, and if I sell my house here in wherever they are, Idaho, Denver, whatever, and I'll have enough to pay that off and do this, and then like they're like in tearful over the phone with me, like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, don't sell your house where you are now.
Right.
Like, just, I guess, die alone in Denver because you can't afford to live next to your grandkids. I'm sorry, but that's like, it's effed up. Like, that's, and there's no conscience when it comes to, even if people can build a housing and it's affordable to them, they're going to look at the market rate, they're going to assume that people from California can come in and afford it, and they're going to charge the premium price for it because that's how the market is. So what can we do
Well, how did
to
we
keep that from happening?
we're not the only ones. Every
No, it's the
county
whole-
in Oregon
Yeah.
and probably Washington, Idaho. Yeah. But you can buy a condo in Louisiana for $40,000.
Right, but then you have to live in Louisiana.
What's
Yes.
wrong with Louisiana? It's a lot like here.
It's attrition. It is the price of everything. I can tell you a 1,700 square foot, non-fancy, a dare level home
Right.
will cost you $240,000 net to build. If you're actually, you could save 30 to 40,000 if you contracted every inch of it yourself.
Right.
But if you're going to hire a contractor or somebody to do it,
Right.
the minimum price of that. So
No land.
How do you
Plus
have
land.
No land.
Right, and
No.
improved a lot.
Including
on
land.
a lot?
No.
A lot of the improved lots that you find now are what, like $100,000 just
any
for the
2 acre
land.
lot's
At least.
100 plus.
Yeah. So
And therein lies the problem, and
But
it's, like I
what do
say,
we-
it's attrition from California and
Yeah.
everywhere else. The only reason they can afford it is because it's what's happened down there,
Right.
and they get the money for their little, $300,000 house. Here is $1 million house down in anywhere in
Right.
Southern California,
right.
except for inland. But
Yeah, my stepdad's family, I think they bought their house down there for $40,000,
Therefore,
and it's now
that's the problem with
worth,
the West Coast. You get the influx of that, which drives the markets and everything else.
right.
And I mean, what's the answer? I mean, you can't dictate to somebody how much money they can make or not make on anything. The only real answer is smaller lots with much smaller houses. Astoria has dozens and dozens from the 20s and 30s, the workforce houses, that none of them are over 800 square feet.
Right.
Well, nobody builds an 800 square foot house anymore.
But I have a list of 20 buyers right now that are looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house for their family to live in. And they can even pay up to $300,000, and we can't find them something, that doesn't need a ridiculous amount of
Too bad.
repairs.
I have one
That's
for you.
brutal.
You do? Send it. Well, no, it's just, it's really hard. And I don't know if there's anything legislatively that any governing body can do to try to
It doesn't
incentivize.
It doesn't work unless
like
you're going to,
grant
it's the
programs
same old
or something.
socialist
I know.
program. Are you going to take money from other people to give to other people to
Right.
make housing for the third person?
Right.
Well,
how
in
does
the,
it- how
in the
does it
cities,
work?
in the
Right.
cities in the county, yeah, you can do something. I mean,
Yeah.
you can,
But I mean, and of course in the counties, when you have a minimum 2 acre lot,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to have it because your density, the amount of buildable land in your density is so large that it's not going to work.
Right. And then, and then we look at renters. I mean, when you're talking about even how much can employees at the museum be making per hour, or the Fort George. I mean, you're lucky if you make $15 an hour. That's like
It
a
depends
living
on what their
wage.
job is, but there's several, it's a living wage.
Yeah, but a living wage at $15 an hour is you're going to make $28,000 a year.
And
You
it's-
can't afford to buy anything with that. That's nothing.
And it's the endless social
There's no.
circle that
Right.
that-
So how do we?
The only way that things become cheaper is if your standard of living falls.
Right.
As long as your standard of living becomes more affluent,
Right.
everything's going to be more expensive.
Right.
Because that's just the way it works.
So in reference to land use and what we can or can't do, how do we try to be useful? When I look at my parents' generation and stuff and feeling either worried that they're, what if you pay off the farm literally and then you still can't afford it in your elder years because the taxes are so high, or these sorts of things that happen to people. My point in wanting to be here is because I love this community and I want the people in it to be okay. So is there anything that we can reasonably do to try to ensure that? I'll be okay, but I mean the older generations, and when I'm older, we'll be having this conversation again, but like, I have no idea. I'm just asking. Does anyone have any idea?
Well, I know one thing we've realized too, we couldn't move back to Astoria into town and pay taxes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
And that's-
and we're in our, and that's okay. But if we have enough houses in Astoria, I think we have to figure out how to get them to be the kind of houses people would want to buy. I mean, do you go and refurbish?
I've refurbished dozens and dozens of houses. It's a complete waste of time as far as economic.
The amount.
For you.
It's got to
yeah.
be a love thing. It's got to be a historic house that you love. Because I've been there and I won't even do it anymore. I'll tear it. Even a historic house, if you're in love with it, it's easier and cheaper to tear it down and rebuild the exact same house to modern standards. That looks exactly the way.
Right.
Because retrofitting houses is not an economic thing unless you do it yourself.
Made a lot of money for me,
You know,
a lot of California money, but
it's not cheap.
no,
No.
it's not.
And I still believe the answer is smaller density of lots and smaller houses. And I believe that you could tie them together, which would be a planning thing, that let's say if you, of course this is on the state of Oregon level, we went from 1 acre to 2 acre lots. While we're building with septic systems in Gerhardt on 75 by 100 lots, so I don't understand why we can't have, I mean, you can have a half acre lot or an acre lot with the right soil conditions and meet every health standard by the DEQ, and why you can't do that, but tie it to, okay, if you're going to have a 2 acre lot, you can build up to a 3,000 square foot house or whatever, or any size you want. If you're going to have an acre one, it reduces it to 12, 13, 1,400 square feet. If you're going to have a half acre one, you can be over 1,000 square feet. And that way, it will make cheaper houses because you're going to be able to get more density and you're going to be building smaller houses.
But-
That's sort of a way to do it.
Yeah. I hear conflicting information about that being effective because there's still
Supply and demand is always
exactly.
an issue.
And so I see people like they did a lot of that in Portland and increased density,
you want-
and it's a
you want-
nightmare there.
Yeah,
You
now
wanna
the
fix it?
traffic,
Let's-
because
let's
nobody
burn it
thought
down?
about-
Let's demand that people actually, banks don't loan to people just for the sake of loaning, because we're right back to the same thing of '07. You know, we had our government put these standards in that we have to have X amount of dollars down on a house. Well, now they're allowing you to borrow the down payment as a separate loan, which you're creating the same problem.
Right.
I mean, if you can't afford a house, you shouldn't be buying a house because it's a lesson for failure.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have another crash, then everybody will be able to afford a house.
That's true, I guess.
Which is a
Just
good
wait
thing.
for it.
Except they won't have a job.
Oh, it's depressing. Okay, so moving through the packet. That was fun.
Okay.
There's a debate,
Thanks.
I love it. No.
social debate.
But
Thanks,
this is
Gail.
a good. This is the kind of conversation for me that just gets people thinking, and you get.
But
I mean,
it directly
that's the most
ties
important
into
thing.
the thought process of what should be happening on the level. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, cities are not allowed to make their own, or counties are not allowed to make, they have to follow the state.
Right.
Which they're becoming more friendly and realizing the tiny house and the smaller density, larger densities and smaller lots.
Right.
Which I think within the next 10 years, you're going to see a lot of that changing.
Right. Or the kind people have talked about wanting to do like a tiny house village with their friends, stuff like that. Almost communal living, but private, your own private space, which I think is. I hear a lot of people that are older folks that want to do that to like retire with their friends, Golden Girls style, but not like in the same house, like so you have privacy. I know we've talked about that when we get older, but that's not an allowable use in a lot of spots too, because if they're
Not in any.
yeah,
I was
if they're
gonna say-
technically their own individual house and you want 4 people But that's the only way we're gonna be able to afford it.
Communal type
So
of-
our
Yeah.
tiny houses are not allowed out
No,
here?
they're
It's a
allowed,
glorified
but-
RV site.
Right.
They're allowed, but you can't put multiple dwellings. You can do one mother-in-law suite as now, but you can't do multiple dwellings on one lot. It
Right.
is one unit per one lot. And like I say, the minimum density of residential lots, except for the exception zone down in Gerhardt area and that, is 2 acres.
Right.
Even the 1 acre zoned lots are 2 acre minimums that they all change for somebody's for health and safety issues.
I mean, shouldn't we as a rural area be considering those kinds of ideas? Because there's more land out here. I get it that we're not going to be near services and there's going to be increased traffic and all that kind of stuff. But if there's a demand for that, do we drive zoning changes to accommodate that? And economically speaking, who's really going to be willing to pull the trigger and do that, or is that just an idea?
Well, I think if it was, so
just
long
an
as that
idea.
was written in such a way to prevent like any exploitation of that by certain development-minded people that might see that and be like, oh, I can build and do the thing of supply and demand. I guess in my mind, I feel like a group of friends that want to kind of all pitch in and afford to buy land and build a small house. Yeah, you should be able to do that. But I just always go to that worst case scenario. It's like think through very thoughtfully how someone could imagine splitting up the lots or selling them all individually or doing something that would end up being undesirable to how we want.
I mean, people
Because you
can
think
do
about the
that
neighbors.
today, right? You can go in on a piece of land. You can
But you can't put
subdivide
multiple
it, right?
dwellings on
You
it.
can subdivide it if it's within a zone, you can subdivide it, but you can't
But-
go to any less than the minimum standard. She's talking about
Right.
taking 2 acres and having 5 friends having small
little slivers,
Tiny
Yeah.
pizza
houses.
size.
500,
Yeah.
800 square
Even
foot.
partitioning the land, putting small
Right.
houses out.
Well, yeah, why
So
would
we
you
don't have to
have to
separate-
have lots?
Right.
You know?
You don't, but
No,
you
you
couldn't
don't.
You
even,
have to have a
if you
lot.
kept it as one big lot, you couldn't put 5 separate little houses
and you
on
can
it.
do it through with a bunch of restrictions. I mean, it could happen. In
Right.
the state of Oregon would never go for it, but it's a good thought.
It's nice to dream. I've even thought if
Well-
they're connected by like a long hallway, it's technically just one
See,
dwelling.
that's a mother-in-law dwelling. That's exactly what you can do with a mother-in-law dwelling. You
Turn
can
off
build
the
under
recorder.
800
Is that it,
square
the long
foot.
hallways?
You could build a separate house, which they did out on
You don't
one of
have
my
to walk down
developments,
it.
Polar Ridge out there.
Just has to
The people
exist.
on the end built a separate little house, and they just connected it with a breezeway.
A
which is
breezeway, that's the
kinda cool.
That's
technical
what we
term.
would tell people in Florida, just connect it with a breezeway.
Call
But-
it a rainway.
But back to your thing.
Monsoon
Of
wind.
course, again, the state of Oregon would never allow it. But the idea of having 2 or 5 acres and having, let's say, put a density of 1 house per acre, so that's all on the same lot in a communal thing, and having 5 homes on it of somebody, creating your own big septic system, which is allowed, and allowing somebody to do something that way. Of course, it'd be, everybody would fall out of favor with each other and fight, and everything would go
Right, there's
psycho. But that's up to deed.
That's a whole nother
That's
story.
up to deed restrictions and lawyers. But-
Right.
But I think, isn't that what this committee, we're supposed to ask for the moon or
Sure.
look, it's all out there. We know we have to do something, so I know you go back to, well, the state of Oregon, we never go for that. Well, that's kind of irrelevant, if you ask me. It's relevant.
Unfortunately,
It is relevant, but it's irrelevant for the purpose of the discussion of saying,
Correct.
we want to
Correct.
have this discussion, we want to move forward with whatever idea we're going to put forth. So I don't think we should be, to me, we shouldn't be afraid to say anything. You just ask for everything. And
And actually,
What's-
the Jeffers Gardens has got all sorts of potential to do a lot of things up on hills, because the sewer and the water is right there. Of course, the city of Astoria kind of puts a nix into that, but if somebody told them, well, yeah, you got to take as much as we can get, or I hate to say it, but they'd never do it, as the city should actually annex.
I
part of Jeffers Gardens.
wish, well, why can't they become their own thing?
What, the Jeffers Gardens?
Yeah.
Well, they can, except for
It's too-
you're going to have to build build the infrastructure of a sewage treatment plant, which is gonna be horrendously expensive, because we already have the most expensive sewer out in Jeffers Gardens than there is anywhere in Clatsop County.
Really?
Oh, yeah, by far.
That
Not
vac-
only do we
that
pay
vacuum
our
thing
$80
sucks
a
up-
month, but we're taxed, a percentage of our tax goes to the sewer district plant. So really just our basic sewer alone on an average house is about $125, $35 a month.
Whoa,
Just for the sewer, not the water.
whoa,
True
that's
story.
crazy.
Yeah.
And there
Well,
was,
the insurance too, flood insurance
Well,
out here.
that's a different subject,
Yeah.
but I'm just talking about the sewer.
About the sewer.
Because, they put the bond out there, and then the city of Astoria, we're under the thumb of the city of Astoria that's got to accept our amount of volume, which we're not to the capacity yet, but there's only so much you can do, and then you got to get their approval, and then they can basically increase their sewer rates, as they do in their own. They can do it.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that the sanitary district in Jeffers Gardens is linked to
Yes.
to the
it's
city?
Right at,
We
as
don't-
you
we
go
don't
under
pay
the old
them, we
Youngs,
pay
where you
the-
go to the old Youngs Bay Bridge,
Yeah,
going to Astoria.
right.
If you look just before that, I own that lot that's right there across from the Mexican restaurant. You look there, there's a big sewer manhole that's kind of up right on the corner. That's bored underneath the bay, and it comes up, if you look right over where the optometrist's office used to be, that's whatever it is. That
Chiropractor office now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, where they
that
cut those
little-
trees down.
little freestanding thing is the actual pump that pumps it into the city of Astoria's.
I did not,
Yeah.
why didn't I know that? That's embarrassing. That's my district. That's,
It's a lot to know, there's a lot.
well, I mean.
Good thing you came out today.
Because the water, I've met with the water people,
The water is a separate private water system.
and they're very frustrated because they want to be able to take more, they're at capacity. See, that's one of the growth issues.
And and it's the same thing. The city of Astoria on Youngs River has more capacity than a 500,000 population city could have. That's
Well-
untapped, that's owned by the city of Astoria.
But it's a water rights issue.
It's a water rights
And
issue
that's different than
well,
having,
their cubic feet of water, they own the cubic feet of water that can be drawn out of Youngs River. And they own it. They don't use it at all. The Lewis and Clark uses some of it, and they've got their own little bit, but they've got all the capacity in the world if the city of Astoria would let them, and they won't.
so what's that about? Why?
It's all about a little weird power trip thing. In fact, Betsy Johnson was going to enact legislation that no individual, because it's the water of the state, that no individual can just own the water rights, and that for it free it all up for them. But we tried to do some more when they had the moratorium for 5 or 6 years. We tried to get the city of Astoria to give us some more.
Release, they just have to
They
release their
weren't
plans.
interested.
What-
They
What's
might
their
need it.
motivation?
They might need it someday for backup. Like the city of Astoria can't possibly grow
I was going to say they're not
by
getting any bigger.
50% because there isn't enough land base.
Right. So sorry, I didn't know that either, that the sewer, all from Jeffers Gardens gets
Yeah, I
piped in then through,
It's a vacuum system.
That's
And
fascinating.
I'll give you a little more information about
Yeah.
it. It's a vacuum system, and if you see the sewer treatment plant over there, you see that big black tank there, that stores all of Jeffers Gardens poo until 1 to 5 o'clock in the morning is when it can only be released to the city of Astoria.
Okay.
wow.
So,
Because I feel like at a conversation that I
regular.
had with was it Jeff Harrington is a public works guy? He was, I mean, we didn't get this in depth, but was mentioning like water capacity, the city's fine. Sewer treatment capacity, not so much.
Right.
Like we're at the, kind of at the cap before they have to do some capacity building, whether that's building a second treatment or tank facility. I don't actually understand how
probably
sewage
bigger-
systems
bigger-
works. but-
Bigger treatment.
Yeah,
But,
something
you know,
expensive.
fascinatingly enough, the sewage treatment has come in the last 15 to 20 years, thanks, believe it or not, to the Bill Gates Foundation for third world countries. They've developed all sorts of these portable, really efficient sewage systems that you can just truck in, set up, and they're done, and they'll supply, a thing the size of a house will supply 5,000 people. So.
And actually it's
they're-
tied into, the Bill
whole
Gates stuff is
sewage
tied
thing-
into a
the whole
water
sewage
and
thing
sewer.
Okay.
is
Together.
coming to a big head where it's not gonna be, you don't have to have these huge ponds and everything else. They just got little manufacturing things where the raw sewage comes out into a fertilizer and then squeezes all the water out, and drinkable water comes out the other end
Brilliant.
in a matter of 15 minutes.
Look on Netflix.
Yeah,
I just
just-
Oh, yeah,
I
the
saw
Bill
that.
Gates one, yeah.
That's a fascinating thing. One of the things I would love to have this group think about are those long-term issues. I mean, it's remarkable to me what has happened with sewage treatment just during my career. I mean, it's just been a world of difference. I've worked with Arenco on a couple of projects in Pacific County. They've got some marvelous systems.
Yeah.
They're still spending, but I'm hoping that over time, you know, the price can come down as we get some competition in that
Well,
market.
and if you watch that documentary, they talk about the price point, and they actually have toilets that actually you can put in a room that function the same exact way. They're a mini treatment plant, but they're too expensive for the third world country, but they certainly are for us, because the price point on them is $5,000 or whatever it is right now, which I know people have spent $5,000 on the toilet.
That's true.
So, and that, you know, and that's an issue of planning too. Of course, we're all talking social engineering now, but it's, you know, if, you know, that needs to be looked at in the long term of how far it's come, where that, again, you can have a lot X size if you've got your own sewage treatment plant. Because that's the huge issue about lot sizes.
Well, there's another issue, I think, that you have to consider, though, that comes from the Portland lesson. When Portland started growing south toward Oregon City, there was a huge amount of what had been farmland, and quite productive farmland. And they zoned it in a way that made it very attractive for hobby farmers, and who built McMansions on these houses. And one of the things that was learned was that even though these houses were on big lots, they demanded urban services. They wanted their roads plowed. They wanted the best schools possible. They wanted refuse service. All kinds of non-traditional, what we call urban demands. And it became hugely expensive. And they didn't always get what they wanted. It was just a real unhappy situation. So to me, there's kind of a sweet spot between the size of a property and whether or not it truly is a rural place.
Well, and back to my original statement, the size of the house tied to the size of the lot.
But if you have a lot of them together, then you're creating a community. And that community is going to want services.
Sure, and you just gotta, well, here we go again in zoning, you just gotta have them, like I say, Jeffers Gardens is a prime example. Great infrastructure, pretty good water, pretty good sewer, and tons of land that's out, you know, most of the, where everything can be built now shouldn't be built. And, you know, like Gerhardt or anything else, do density transfers where you can move up onto the hills where it should be done. In a small area that's around the school and everything else where it makes total logical sense, because you're not creating, and I understand the amount it costs the whole for the few, and that's one of the problems with planners that really get hung up where an evil developer like me disagrees, because if it's already there, it doesn't cost any more. If you already have power grid there, there's a power grid there. If you already have, the ambulance has to come out to the house in Olney, it's got to come out to the one house in Olney. So how does it affect everybody else if it's got to go there anyway? If there's two or three of them there, technically I would say it would be less expensive, but you know, if you already have to go there. I mean, I understand going out to Saddle Mountain in the dense forest and being able to, which Oregon has a great thing about their template test, that you can't just build out in the middle of nowhere. You have to have your surrounding houses and properties. And I can understand that because that creates huge problems for everybody else because they have to pay for it, yes and no.
Have you all talked, Gail, about the template issue? That was one of the things, of course, that I can't remember who, it was somebody at the Goal 2 meeting, I think. It was DLCD. It was in one of those presentations.
Yeah, it was probably Tim Murphy's.
Are you all familiar with the template system? Because I think that's something that we should talk about to make everybody familiar with it, because it's a pretty unique.
So basically what the template test does is it looks at 160-acre square or rectangle. And the point of the test is to put that rectangular square on the center of your property and then to look at how many lots are around you, when those lots were created, do they have a house on them, and if they do, when was that house built? And the number of lots and houses you need, I think it's always 11 lots and three houses or
It
5
depends on your
houses.
soil.
Yeah, it depends on your soil type.
production. Yeah.
3 existing houses, 7 lots, or up to 11,
So,
down to 4.
yeah, so basically what you're doing is what Jim said, you're looking to see, is this really already a relatively developed area? And you have to pass that test of having a certain number of lots, certain number of structures constructed before 1993 before you are given approval to build on your property. And then you've got to keep your house as close to the other developments as you can. So if you've got your houses clustered here, you can't, and you
Go
pass your
over there to
template test,
stay
you don't
away
get to
from
build over
everybody.
here, because then all that is going to do is leapfrog the development further out.
Right.
That
Interesting.
explains.
Yeah, that explains a lot.
Well, also getting back to the housing, and we were talking about, not here, but building on top of businesses. So like, isn't the co-op building either apartments or?
I don't
They're
think
not-
so.
they're
No,
not given-
they're
Would've
not
been
doing a
nice.
mixed use.
But there's a lot of
Well,
that in
they-
downtown.
Yeah, they
Astoria.
had talked to, I thought they had
Would've been
talked
a
about
nice
that,
thing.
but anyway. Yeah, so your workers can live in and work in the same area, but where they could actually buy instead of renting, maybe rent that apartment or rent that or lease it, whatever you're going to do. But eventually buy that place, and then you've got everybody where they can go to work, live close to where they work. You're not driving. And we had talked about, because there are those kinds of buildings in Astoria. Where people don't have a lot of stuff, they don't need a lot of stuff, they don't need a storage unit. You know, it's
Yeah.
back to the old days of like having a boarding house.
That's an
and they're-
urban use, though. and
Right,
We're
that's
not
an-
talking about that here.
It's true, but you're totally right. And I just have to say, the thing about that's been really frustrating to watch within city limits is that because those are in commercial zones, those buildings are turning hands and people are turning what was long-term rentals into Airbnb type
Yeah.
short-term rentals and taking that housing out of workforce housing affordability because it's commercially zoned, it's an outright use. And it makes me furious.
Oh, that's,
No, it really.
It should be stopped.
That was with the little thing about how we have adequate housing in.
Right.
Crap.
Exactly.
Because of exactly what you just said.
Yep.
Vacation, people that have their vacation homes and everything's being turned into Airbnb.
Gearhart, Cannon Beach. Boy, what was the percentage of full-time residents in Cannon Beach? Something
I don't know,
4%?
like
40?
Yeah, something
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I mean,
Very
like
small.
insane.
Terrible. Terrible.
And there should be zones,
Yeah,
and there should be lots of zones that don't allow it.
I agree.
I mean, there can
well,
be
I
some.
thought Astoria, I didn't realize, sorry, that was an urban, I wasn't trying to go down that
It's a
path.
good idea, though.
But I thought that's where we were trying to go, was to give workers a place to live close enough to their place of business, no matter where they are. But I
What
didn't
this-
realize Airbnb had taken over.
what they failed to do at the city level, they did some good work at trying to prevent Airbnb. Like you now, if you're in specific residential zones, they won't give you a permit to have an Airbnb, and you're supposed to get a permit to do that. And they'll say, no, this is a single use residential, someone needs to live in it long term. But because of all of the housing that's above commercial spaces downtown, and because it's a commercial zone, they haven't done anything to legislate that. So that's been happening over the workers, over the, I think, what was Teal's. There's been a handful of others I can't think of right now. And there's nothing anyone can do yet. I've talked to the city and tell them that they should get on top of that shit.
But it's not,
Well,
it's the political will isn't there, because what's Astoria all about now? Tourism. And if you,
I know.
nobody wants anybody to build a hotel anymore, which is obvious.
Well,
So
we're not
therefore,
out of space. Tourists have plenty of places to stay. We're not sold out. Our hotels, that's not a
in the summertime they are.
Yeah, we are.
2 or 3 weekends a year.
No, it's.
I think.
And I know.
I mean, we can look at the
tourism shouldn't be
statistics of that,
a
but
dirty
that's
word. There's
pretty
a lot
rare.
of money there that comes and goes. We can't just trade money amongst ourselves. We tried that in the 70s and 80s, and Astoria was almost dead. And so it shouldn't be the only thing that keeps Astoria or the county going, but it's a big part of it, and it's okay if you can accommodate it, but that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
with
No, there's
hotels,
balance to
but-
try to strike a balance.
Yeah.
Totally.
What about Jeffers Gardens? I mean, that is, I drive
Right
through
here.
there every day, and it to me seems like the ideal place to try to, I mean, I realize it's rural.
It's a
But-
floodplain.
Yeah, the floodplain
It's a
insurance.
That's the biggest issue.
Well, you know,
How much is that on average a month for just a regular house? How much is flood insurance?
Well,
I've heard
if it's grandfathered, it's fairly cheap. And but if new stuff, if it's below the floodplain or something, which you can't build below the floodplain, but if it's still in the floodplain, it's the FEMA flood insurance is very expensive. Fortunately, there's a big private sector that is moderately, you can beat FEMA's price by 70%, because this, even though it's in a floodplain and everything else, it's low risk type stuff.
so the land out there is about what, 7.5 feet, maybe, generally down.
Between 7 and 9 feet,
We got to be at 13 feet
which is supposedly coming
for
down
finished floor. Well,
until it raises up 2 years later.
well, it's relative to the ground. It's always going to be about the same, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
But the point is,
the water is going to keep coming up.
well, yeah, well, that's a whole nother thing. But theoretically, Jeffers Gardens has a lot of good zoning. There's some commercial, industrial, some residential. There's a lot of land there. I mean, I think from a transportation perspective, you could create density there. You can have a bus route go across the Lewis and Clark Bridge over out toward Walmart, and then
It already does, doesn't it?
yeah, is there a bus route that goes through there? All right, there's a bus
It
route.
goes through there. It won't stop, though.
It won't? Does
No.
it stop at Miles Crossing? That's
No,
crazy.
the bus will not stop at Miles
Yeah, I've never
Crossing.
seen a bus stop there. That's
It
why I
can't
just
get in
assumed
or
there
out
was.
of
That
there.
intersection's a
Yeah,
nightmare.
it's the worst.
Well, it needs to be a
Need a
But
roundabout.
it'll be a roundabout.
We need
That'll
a
be
We need a
addressed when
roundabout.
it happens. And
With all our riches,
We're happy.
do we have the
roundabouts are
opportunity to think about Jeffers Garden and what we
Well,
can do with it?
okay, here's the problem with Jeffers Garden. Back to the same old thing. Limited water, limited sewer. It has both, but they're kind of held captive by the city of Astoria. And basically it is being held captive by the city of Astoria by itself. Because they have the capacity to have way more water. They have an excellent treatment plant.
Can we sue the city of Astoria to leave us alone?
Well, the only way you can gonna do that is through legislation, and I think it's coming.
Okay, well,
Well, I think you have to have
They'll-
that conversation,
they'll,
a hard
uh,
conversation.
It'll be, if you're not using a waterway, like especially Young's River, it's a hot point, that if you're not utilizing it, you don't get it forever.
You
Right.
see what I'm saying?
Well, actually, yes, the governor right now is starting a whole new 100-year water vision.
Right.
That's gonna take a hard look at water rights. And I think it's going to impact rural areas well, I think, because we're gonna have to really start taking a look
Except
at
for
our
the water-
watersheds.
Except for the water meter on your well, they're gonna make you
Except what?
do. Rotten bastards.
Water meter on the well. He doesn't want water meters on wells.
There's a reason they register water systems now, is because it's just a matter of time before they hook up your water meter and you're paying 2 cents a gallon or whatever it is.
Well, but
whatever the going
I think
rate
that's gonna
For your
depend
own
on
well
the
water?
geology of it.
Should go to schools
is. They're going
anyways.
to, I guarantee, mark my words. There's no other reason they register. Every well I've put in recently all has a nice little metal tag. And I get it from the state of Oregon that I have to have it where it is on the coordinates and
Well, because
Interesting.
technically it
gotta
has to
be
be tested.
displayed so
Right.
that the little
So
Nazis
they have
can
to know
come.
what they are.
Big brother,
How
big
much
brother.
water you draw out?
No, they don't yet, but they're going to.
We don't use the term Nazis.
Big
Anymore.
brother, big brother.
Yeah.
Like, who gets
Seems
copies
reasonable.
of these tapes? Because
Everybody, it's on the website.
Anybody that
This
wants
is
them?
public record. Yeah.
Nazis.
between me,
As you can tell, there's not a big interest in this planning.
Well, I think let's go back to, okay, if we're out here, what is the big picture that,
Yes.
it's all on the table again. We're back to transportation, whether it's the roundabout at Miles Crossing, and another big thing out here in Jeffers Gardens, and probably all along Youngs River, all of those, the water has nowhere to go. The drainage systems are either broken, full of garbage, or they're non-existent. They've been shoveled over the last 20 years. So now the water sits on the highway, whether we have an inch of rain or 10 inches of rain. It's a nightmare driving through.
Watches.
Because again, it has nowhere to go. So you're talking about a transportation system, working with ODOT, getting that cleaned up. We need bike lanes, we need walking lanes.
Technically,
You have a lot of traffic out here now we didn't have 12 years ago.
technically, the Clatsop County Road Department is responsible for every ditch in Jeffers Gardens.
So if I
They have
call
the
them and have them,
ability and authority to dig them out. If they have access to them, they will come clean them out. True story.
do they need to
But-
be
but
called and
here's-
told to?
Here's where the problem is. Here's where the problem is. And I've had them do it several times, and they've been really efficient. Anyway, herein lies the problem. Okay, every one of these sloughs and ditches and everything else that are this big, every person that owns it or anything else, you're required by the county to have at least an 18-inch culvert. So everybody's got culverts this big. So the volume of water,
Can't.
especially in
Right.
ditches, especially in
Bare
sloughs.
minimum.
Right.
I mean, every farmer out there has a crossing that's got an inadequate, that are the main feeds. The original sloughs are the main feeds for all the ditches. Well, every farmer out there's put these little,
Culverts,
I know on a personal basis that I have a 10-inch culvert in a 8-foot wide slough. And guess what? I'd really like to replace it,
Yeah.
but you know what'll happen to me if I do?
You'll be stuck in permitting purgatory.
I'll
Oh, gosh.
get in trouble from them. I'll get in trouble from the Division of State Lands. I'm going through this right now. I opened up a ditch. I'm in all sorts of trouble with the Division of State Lands because I took an existing ditch that only runs in the wintertime, and I dug it out. Because if it's over 50 yards, you're the devil.
50 yards of material that you move.
50 yards of material per year right at this point. 50 yards of material per year you can remove. You can fill one time on per lot or per area or what the hell ever they call it. Area. It's kind of like the area of the floodplain. What's the area? Anyway, but now for the farms, it's going to be 3,000 yards a year for a mile. But it's all changing, but they're fighting it as much as they can because those little word that I said, they're authority, as Cartman would say on South Park. and they,
you watch
they,
South Park?
Absolutely.
Now
South
that-
Park and Family Guy is
that
my
Life
model,
lesson.
Now this all
is my
makes sense
model in
now.
life. Anyway, so there's me in a
love
nutshell.
Well, I
But
think
their authority, they're
is me in a
gonna,
nutshell.
he flat told me, he says, that's my job, that's what I do. And I say, you're the most repressive people I've ever seen. I go, I'm not doing a goddamn thing.
And you're trying to help
And
the
I
drainage of the
actually
land.
pulled, there was a crossroad in the stream that was done 35 years ago, and I pulled the culvert out, and I'm in trouble for pulling the culvert out that was completely plugged up, that was collapsed. That's the way it works. So, again, I'd really like to replace some of my culverts, but
Start the permitting process now.
Right?
this
For 10
wasn't
years
on,
from now.
this wasn't on Orchard Lane, was it?
no.
Well, and that, which begs another point or question where a lot of these things were written way back when, or when we didn't have as many people, we didn't have the kind of activity we now have moving through the county road out here. So if we're looking towards the future when you're going to have, what? Are we going to have more trucks, more people, more houses, more buses,
Yes.
more dump trucks, more log trucks? So you have to plan for that and figure out that what is existing now doesn't accommodate that.
Unfortunately, Jeffers Gardens, Lewis and Clark, Youngs River has excellent road systems, and they have tons of escape routes. And that's a good part about that out there. It isn't like it's got gravel roads.
It's the reason Lewis and Clark set up their canoe there. They knew. They knew back then in 1804.
They started it all.
They did.
Damn white guys wouldn't
They
have come
did.
here, we wouldn't have this.
I know.
We having this conversation. So say they build a roundabout at Miles Crossing.
Well, that isn't gonna happen in the near future.
Well, let's just say.
Let's say
Very
they
good.
We're going to
I'm
say.
just picturing.
Right, we're wishing, it's our wish.
I'm just picturing like the
sorry.
best case scenario of like the Astoria Jeffers Garden link. You know, like what does that look like? That looks and where's the line? Is that at the old Youngs Bay Bridge? Like when does it become the city's problem road wise versus the county's problem?
Is it when you get off the bridge?
It's the state's
Or the state's problem? Yeah. Well,
I thought that was a county road.
No.
It's just the old state highway?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Highway 101 business.
right.
Oh, yeah,
business.
right. So that's
State
ODOT.
highway, and that's why them crappy bridges are there, and we keep every 5 years throwing $40,000 at them.
It used to run
40
through
million.
the
Yeah, I was
airport
going to say,
Yeah.
if it was
where the
just
highway
40.
ran.
Yeah.
Widen them.
I would
They can
just,
spend
I mean,
money.
I was just
they're
even
historic.
back to what you were saying of having if there was a roundabout, if there was a sidewalk or bike lane, like ways that people can get from Jeffers Garden, say if there was, imagine a world where there was a bunch of affordable housing right there.
A tram.
And people wanted to go to work every day downtown Astoria and get home and not have,
Right.
200 cars driving from Jeffers Gardens to try to park downtown so they can go to work at the Fort George and drive home every day.
Right.
How do they get to work? How do they?
Any
And that
new road
involves
projects
the,
are required to
Sunset.
have bike lanes and sidewalks.
Good. And bus service.
Yeah, it has to
You have
involve
the
the
bus
bus.
Why
stop
doesn't the bus stop at Jeffers?
because
That's
they're
amazing.
scared.
That blows me away.
There's nowhere for them to safely get off the highway. I'm just saying.
When I grew up in Jeffers Gardens, I had to ride my bike all the way to the pool every summer. No bus came to get me.
Well, you had to go all the way up and over the hill?
No, I would go
No,
around the hill.
Tapiola. Oh,
you
I
go
would
around.
never.
Go
No,
all
we
the
didn't.
way.
It was
Tapiola
Tapiola was a
pool.
Hey,
swimming
I'm
pool
so
back then.
damn old that I remember the days of riding our bicycles around through Jeffers Gardens when the bridge wasn't there, going to Fort Stevens and stuff. Before it was, and that was the main highway, and there were at least 8 grocery stores between those 2 bridges.
Interesting.
Wow.
8?
8.
So
In fact, most of them are still there, but they're not grocery stores.
was Jeffers Gardens originally very residential?
Yeah.
I mean, is this
I mean,
commercial?
It's always been commercial because there were there were, let me think about this, there were two
Well,
or
the
three
corridor wasn't always this
motels
commercial.
there.
No, this has all happened in 2 years, everything out here.
I mean,
whether
that was the
Stevens or
highway until
Ferguson.
64. That was the main highway, that was main highway 101.
No, this was farmland, and all of the industrial stuff has just happened.
Well, actually, it was all wetland.
Or,
Wetland.
yeah,
Before
sorry.
it was farmland.
We're talking about Jeffers Gardens? Those structures have been around a lot longer than the
I'm
last
talking
2
about the
years.
corridor, so like where you see Bergeson's new building
Yeah.
and Stevens
But-
pole barn.
all
and-
the
Stoner's Garage, where the John Deere dealership
Yeah.
is, was Stoner's Garage, and there was a wrecking yard there.
Yeah.
And there were multiple wrecking yards out there. There were motels. I have pictures of Jeffers Gardens from the 50s. It's pretty interesting. That whole intersection, that was, never had those guardrails there. It was just a, kind of like a roundabout without it being a roundabout.
A free-for-all?
Yeah, it was a free for all.
Intuitive roundabout.
Still is.
What's being built, Madam Permit Master? What's
Wow.
being built at, the golf,
That's
Ferguson
Ferguson's
tile.
Ferguson
Stone.
tile and stone.
what, he's building a commercial building there?
Yeah, they're moving out of Astoria
It's
into that
huge.
building.
Oh, I thought they were
How-
moving most
how
of their
did
stuff
he
to
get-
Town
Roundabout?
Point.
Did we do what about?
Plan for the roundabout
not
when
their
you
job.
set, well,
It's in our TSP.
yeah, so when you cited that building, it looks like it's set far enough back that there would be room. I know they're gonna take out land clears. I know that that's gonna be
But it's-
sacrificed.
That's up to
Really?
the state of Oregon. The
Oh,
state of
yeah.
Oregon, they have to get the state of Oregon's input, and if the state of Oregon has no input, which they do on most things because they don't want to deal with it, they can't do anything about it.
Well,
Has no money.
it might have happened if the original construction there had been done.
Well, the original bypass that everybody.
No, I'm speaking of the Lee property where they were
Yeah.
gonna put a grocery store.
Well, that's what it was until they killed it.
I wasn't here.
Back to my rough generalizations. Well, actually, them and the sewer district killed it. They were building it, and then they raised up the floodplain. They
So
built
much of it was
They
done
built it all
without
and did it all,
permits
and they raised, this is Jennifer Bunch, they were gonna raise the floodplain up, and Jennifer Bunch retroactively was enforcing the floodplain and told them they had to raise up what they had already done, and it hadn't done yet, so he just told them to pound sand. And that and the laundromat, they were gonna charge him the $6,000 assistance development fee per washing machine, which made it kind of impractical.
Who was charged the
The sewer
The sewer
district was gonna
district?
do that, but then they.
So everybody that builds out here, like Bergeson or Stevens or whoever they are, they all have to have permits, correct? And go through the planning process?
Even ain't out there.
So, and there is no height restriction?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's no restriction.
And so he must be right at it.
Now, that's a curious question for
forgot.
you. That is always a curious question for me. So we have a 28-foot height restriction. So is that from the top of the floodplain or from the top of the native ground?
It's from the average grade at the four corners before you disturb the ground.
Yeah, see, that needs to change.
Yeah, because you're
You
taking
can't,
away 5
yeah,
feet.
you can't have that anymore. That's insane. That really has a serious impact on.
Well, have you've driven by the sewer plant and seen my monstrosity I'm building there?
Yeah.
Well,
That's what made me wonder.
That is the floodplain. That
Yeah.
is where it
You
has to
start
be.
at the floodplain and then build up from there.
Well, that is where that is where the floodplain is. And that's gonna be TP Freight's building, but it
So that's
needs to
not
sit
just surcharge.
there. No, hell no. No, that's where it's gotta be, if you're gonna build a building.
Ferguson's in the floodplain.
And oddly enough.
But he's up on that little,
Oddly
that
enough,
rise there.
Jeffers
built that
Gardens,
rise.
Jeffers Gardens is like this.
Well, not,
It's tilted.
no,
You don't
Lee
know it,
did,
but it's
Mr.
tilted.
Lee did, didn't he?
Everything over by the bridge, over by the Astoria side of the bridge is higher than everything on the other side of the bridge, by about 2 feet.
So when they were looking to do the butterfly museum at that site, they brought in Phil at some point in the past. And then Ferguson had to build it up even higher because in the intervening years, the flood maps changed and the base flood elevation got raised.
Like within the last 20
It's
years?
just the way they did it.
That's just how
They
they
didn't
measured it.
raise it, they just formulated. Isn't that the way it works? They didn't actually change the height of the floodplain, they just reformulated how it.
I don't know exactly what the
And it made it go
floodplain
up.
was before.
Guess it did. By about 6 feet, if I recall correctly.
Yes, three and a half to be exact. Oh, well.
Okay.
Do we want to let Gail continue on her next sheet?
Yes.
With land supply and
Yeah,
housing
so
trends?
We don't have to go through this entire thing, and we don't have to do the questions that are on here. If you're happy with the discussion we're having, that's perfect. So it's the agenda is a guideline, so don't feel that you're completely bound to it. So I really only put a few more slides in the back of this, things to think about. We talked about some of the housing trends. Climate change obviously is the big item that we need to be thinking about and how that impacts everything that's going to happen in the next 20 years. So it's temperature rise, it's sea level rise, it's increase in wildfire, it's, may result, we have to think about transportation. How do we promote alternative forms of transportation that are more carbon neutral or don't emit as much pollution? How do we build better housing? And I know you just said that it's really expensive to refurbish, but in terms of environmental sustainability, it's better.
Okay.
He does know.
Well, okay, a prime example of that, and you can verify this. Most houses that you retrofit or rebuild for a historic house, you're pretty much getting it. You're basically down to the studs, because you gotta insulate them and do everything. I mean, if you do them right, unless somebody doesn't want a modern house that looks old. But you're basically going down to the studs, and your amount of building materials and everything else in your weather-tight house is probably only 40% of the cost of the house, and probably 30% of the materials, 20% of the materials. Everything after that, so I don't think there's any advantage to rebuilding houses, except for historic values, which I understand. You have a Victorian house and everything else, I mean, but again, you run into the balloon frames and the weird framings and the, everything's shiplap and outdoor plumbing, and God, there's everything wrong with them. I mean, I've done dozens and dozens and dozens. Okay, sorry for arguing again, as usual, I'll shut my mouth.
It doesn't even sound like you're arguing, you're just sharing information.
And then just think again too, water shortages. What are the impacts that we're going to see from climate change and water shortage? We know Falcon Cove Beach has got a water moratorium right now going on. What are we doing with wildlife? I'm on this wildlife task force.
There's not
Oh,
anything
cool.
you can do about it.
There is, I don't disagree with you. But anyway, as
That's
we
good.
encroach and build more houses out in the rural areas, we're only encouraging more mini Gerhards.
Right. I mean, are there huge negative impacts of having these types of interactions with elk?
To the,
Yes.
to the property owner,
It
there's no,
depends, yeah, it depends.
I don't
Don't tear
believe
up
that
your
there's
property like
any
there's no
negative to
tomorrow.
the elk themselves, because they
Right.
seem to thrive.
They're fine,
I
right.
mean, when we did Polo Ridge, we thought, oh,
Right.
God, we're gonna build all these houses, the elk aren't gonna be here as much. Oh,
Yeah.
they
just
love it.
Show up
Right.
and sit
They
in
have
your
more
yard.
stuff.
I mean, right, it seems like,
Better.
And it's irrigated year round.
It's easier
Right.
to walk around
The
on.
deer are every bit as aggressive as the elk.
but the Astoria, downtown Astoria deer are no joke. They are
Well, I mean, out here in the country.
out here too, but they're, even in town, they're like
Because they're,
families of them just in your yard, you can't get rid of them. I mean, I think they're
not,
cute.
Well, they'll come right up to the door.
no,
they'll eat
nobody to
everything.
hurt
You
them.
can't grow food out, yeah. you
No.
have to- They eat everything.
And the bulls, actually, that's true, they get aggressive.
Yeah.
The males do, they get,
Everybody's cats.
is a male deer a
Who
bull?
eats cats?
No,
What's a male
coyote.
deer?
Oh, the coyotes, oh, yeah,
Coyotes and cougars.
oh, yeah.
I think I learned that in third
A
grade.
Bambi.
But it was a long time ago.
But
All
there's
right.
nothing we
Anyway,
can do about
that's-
this. That's just how life, that's just how, what it's like if you build an elk.
build more homes in an area that is big game habitat,
Right.
are you setting up a situation where you're creating, where people are gonna move in, and then they're gonna say, it's just like moving next to an airport. Oh my God, there's so noisy next to the airport. Oh my God, there's elk in my yard.
Can we tell these people to not be stupid? And
Well, they already can't
You know, Andrea,
regulate
all
it
my
or
life
do
I've been
anything
trying
about
to.
it.
Yeah, I've been working on it.
And it,
You
you know,
should
so
ask
far,
Harry
it's
about
not
that,
working.
putting
it's just, they don't
CCRs.
listen.
Don't be stupid.
No, just don't, you can't say anything about the elk.
Be kind
You
to
moved into their house. You're in their
Yeah.
territory.
I agree,
Well-
but people don't think that
And
way.
oddly enough, this is the oddest part about it, it's kind of like the bears in the city and stuff. There's 80% of Clatsop County is absolutely rural land where these elk already go. Guess
Right.
why they're where they are? Because the grass is better and they prefer to be there. That's why. They don't, they got all the room in the world to be out in the forest lands, but they prefer to be there. That's why.
That was the
they're
mantra of the hippies back in the 60s. Oregon is better because the grass is better.
there. That's right.
And they like it. I've heard that before.
I did not know where you were going with that.
And it's so
I
good,
see.
it's so good now, there's too much of it.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
right.
man, someone should open a pot
God
shop
can't
in
even make a
Jeffers
living
Gardens.
selling
Yeah.
please.
I
Now you
know.
can't even
Need
make
more
a
of
good
those.
living selling
Oh,
those. What's the world
gracious.
come to?
What happened to good old fashioned
We have
weed dealers like in the 90s?
All right.
just your neighbor. Go to your neighbor.
Are there any other areas in this plan area that are like Jeffers Gardens?
No,
Little,
there's
this is
Right.
kind of
There's
it,
no other
right?
sewer systems. The only ones that did
Westport.
something was, yeah,
That's
true,
Arch Cape.
Westport. and
No, but I
Arch Cape
mean,
have their
in
own.
this planning
In
area.
our planning
no,
area.
No, the,
And I always thought we got our water though from the well up here.
Oh, no, there's a water.
Way out, up by, Old, no.
it's drawn directly out of Youngs River, and they have a huge sewer treatment plant right at the Youngs River Falls up to the right, and that feeds everything else.
You're talking about Youngs River, Lewis and Clark?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
There is, okay, Gearhart and everything else is on, well, Polo Ridge, for a prime example, was on Warrenton water. Warrenton supplies a lot of that. Gearhart used to have, they were getting it from Warrenton. Now Gearhart is on wells again. They had wells before, and now they're on wells again.
And at one point, they had a municipal system.
They were on Warrenton's, and it became too expensive. And right at Cirque Pines is where the end of it is, and everything that way is on the wells of Gearhart.
That across Clatsop Plains there, that whole area?
Well, anything south of Cirque Pines, well, Whiskey Ridge and all those, I believe, are on Gearhart's well system, which, like I say, the piping and everything's all there. They just put a valve on it. They used to have it that way, then they went and got their water from Warrenton, which Warrenton has a marvelous plant and all the water in the world too. But they chose, because it was less expensive, they thought, they started their wells back up.
A lot of the wells through there were picking up salt water though as well, as they drew
And I
down
don't-
the water.
So if we, in our best case scenario, roundabout, bike lane, public trolley, transportation, higher density, Jeffers Gardens extravaganza, we need to, the infrastructure, the sewer, it won't work. We need to upgrade.
We'd have to go to Astoria.
Right.
The sewer district has, and you could ask them that, but I'm pretty sure it's got the capacity for 3 times as much on the existing system.
Okay. Oh,
And I think right now, the availability is like 4,000 and they're at 3,700, I think,
Okay.
homes.
And that tank is.
The tank is-
built so they can actually go up with it.
Yes, and the tank is just a storage thing because they gave them restrictions that they can only pump in off hours.
And so then the other thing I just have to say is that I know that that is an area where a lot of like folks, there's still affordable rentals and stuff in Jeffers Gardens. Like my family, my mom, a single mom, our rent was like $435 a month or something
I
there.
rent multiple ones for
Right.
$700 a month.
Right. And if, I mean, of course, yeah, the 400, that was the 90s. But if,
Well, I'm talking now.
if we're fixing up a place, if we're essentially thinking about trying to promote new development in that area, that's going to affect the lower income people that live there. Where are those people going to go?
Well, you don't have to displace them.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to, but who's going to stop?
What,
That.
say that,
Yeah,
say
what did
that
you have in
again?
mind? I mean, why?
I have no idea. I don't have a solution. I'm just saying, I'm just acknowledging the fact that when we gentrify an area, even if it's for the greater good, on one hand, there's still a bunch of like poor people that don't
Well,
have anywhere to go.
again-
I don't know that you're gentrifying. I think you're.
Yeah,
I know that's a bad, I mean,
Again, back to my statement, the simple solution to it is like, again, down on the plains, is have density transfers. Say that, okay, somebody like me or something wants to take a buildable lot that's on a sewer and move it up behind the Lewis and Clark School, that I can do a density transfer and move it up there and just, and take that and have it created like we do with our density transfers in the plains, is it becomes an open space. It's called downgrading it. It becomes an open space or something that can't be touched. Therefore, instead of displacing anybody by tearing houses down because they're becoming more popular and nicer, that you leave the existing houses there, and any other further development goes up on the hill where you can build the better houses, where they should be anyway.
right,
They're not in the floodplain.
in the floodplain.
And it gives people incentive, because like, when we did it at Polo Ridge and stuff, we took a bunch of density and we downsized it from 5 acres to acre lots, and it creates the incentive to do it, and then we leave vast open spaces where there shouldn't be houses anyway.
Anyway, because it's a swamp.
Wetlands,
I guess I'm just
yeah.
picturing Jeffers Gardens and not, like, where is it not in this lowlands? Like, where's the boundary?
Well,
where
where she
it's-
lives,
Lewis,
Up,
up,
anywhere
hill.
you can just get up, right,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
on a
up by the
ridge.
but then you're not in
Up-
Jeffers
Like
Gardens
when you
anymore.
hit like Bella Ridge
Well,
is basically.
it's on the Jeffers Gardens Lewis and Clark Sewer District.
Gotcha.
Goes to where the stone house is. That's the last, well, it's actually out. Anything towards Jeffers Gardens is in.
Okay.
Everything that way is out.
And that's like the line.
And then that's the line, and it takes up, all that upper area there. And it was supposed to go all the way out into Youngs River, but everybody bitched so much, they just threw it out, which created everybody paying more money and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then it all goes
Remember
towards the dike.
Right.
Or the, yeah.
Okay.
Well, as long as we're talking pie in the sky, I mean, I think with newer houses, you can create more efficient houses, whether it's solar or, there's just so many better, that's not the right English, but materials nowadays. And some can be more expensive, but it's not that much more expensive to build a more energy efficient house. But I think there are places up here on the ridge, I keep pointing probably in the wrong direction. I would love to see a solar panel farm, even if it's passive. We have the capacity to do that, and
We're not the best solar growing area.
Oh, it's
It's
getting
a-
better.
it's
already.
we're
Plenty,
not,
though.
but it's
Efficiency
enough.
is really going up.
Germans have
Yeah,
a
I mean-
lot of solar energy, and I think they have less sun than we have.
yeah, it's
It's out
doable,
there.
is what I'm saying. And the price is continually coming down per year. Just something to throw out there as we're wishing and hoping.
Oregon is, in the last 10 years, their building codes have become way stricter on you have to have efficient, energy-saving materials. You actually, if you build a new house, you have to have a certain amount of, you can choose what you want to do, extra insulation, triple pane windows. You know, they do require that, but I still think that, I still really think the way, the short-term goal of doing what a guy wants to do is smaller lots and smaller houses.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
No more big mansions, nobody can have one.
Well, we have to redefine the American dream, you know? That should be the slogan for Jeffers Garden. Reimagining the American dream.
Come live
do you
in
think?
come live in our American nightmare.
Do you like mold?
Reimagine.
I don't think that's funny.
Do you
I think
like
that's a hell
at
of a
least
good idea.
Of course it
35
is. It's
steps?
an excellent idea. We should
With
be
a picture of
marketing
TV
ourselves.
freight.
35 steps and like to be above 8 feet above your neighbor's
freight
house.
mound.
Come to Jefferson.
And don't worry about the tsunami, it'll be oceanfront
be
property
fine.
when it's done.
But there's lots of places like that. I used to live on Kauai, and a ton of places. I mean, they just build houses on stilts. You just build to houses up
Same with
higher.
Just look at what they're doing in the Netherlands.
And
Fine.
then they'll say,
Right.
I mean, they are below sea level, and they have found an elegant way of solving their problems.
Right.
They really have, but you know what? It's a, well, it's a huge, they also have a lot of money.
Well, yes.
Well, we have,
we
We're
have
dreaming
money
big
too,
here.
it's just the way you choose to use it.
it makes
Thanks,
no
Pam.
sense to me
Really.
why we
No,
have
Mike, I
75 by
was in the
100
Netherlands
lots
a year ago.
within
I
the
spent a
Jefferson
month
Garden
there
Sewer
looking at
District.
all of their water.
They're highly educated.
Up at
too.
the Lewis and Clark School, we
And they
can't
have
build a
very high
house.
tax systems.
I mean, come on.
It's a,
I gotta have
But
80
those
acres.
things are getting
It's a splendid
smaller.
place to live, isn't
Yeah, and you're like
Well,
a block away.
Who
Yes,
built
a
all
block
those new
away.
houses up by the school?
That is
Well,
interesting.
those are still within the Lewis and Clark, and they're still within the sewer district, which anything within the sewer district allows you to have a 75 by 100
oh.
lot per.
I see what you're saying.
it? Should have been apartments, but
Yeah,
that didn't work out.
which I thought that was what those were going to be.
Should have been a part.
I don't know. You don't think so?
Not with the intersection the way it is, I don't think so.
Right.
I think
But
it's all-
what do you fix
all
first?
circles
The
back to the
roundabout
roundabout.
first?
no, but if this group comes up with a vision for expanding the Jeffers Gardens area,
No, reimagining
reimagining.
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 the American dream.
Absolutely.
That's
No,
what we're saying.
That's why I say I mean, I don't know where else in this planning area we could do that.
Can you imagine
No,
that?
we're lucky. I mean, we have one of the great planning areas in Northwest Oregon, really. I
Well,
mean,
it's the only one that has the potential to actually
yeah,
be any kind of house. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
that's
it
true.
does.
And with that, you have to take everything that goes with that and make it all work effectively.
Infrastructure has to happen first.
Yeah,
Before the lot sizes change.
Yeah, the
before
infrastructure has to
density
happen first.
changes,
And you
Plan
can have
action.
some
We
land
could put a
holdings in that area.
moratorium on
Has
some
to.
things and say, hold
Yeah.
on, we gotta get this fixed and hurry up. You can't wait 10
Yeah.
years. We
Yeah.
don't have time for
Can I take 1 second of everybody's time really quick to plug something? That the Downtown Association and the Astoria Arts and Movement Center got nominated for a grant for a $150,000
The
grant
Oddfellows Hall.
for the Oddfellows Hall, and I have little reminder cards.
Good.
If you
I
vote every day,
Yeah.
I'll buy you all cookies. I'll probably do that anyway.
Do you have to be a human, or do you just need to have an email address?
You just need to have an email. Does your dog have an email address? Is that what you're
I
getting
have multiple
5
email
Instagram
addresses.
accounts.
And then there's, do you want more of these?
No,
Oh.
or email.
Or dogs? I have we have some fun events coming up this month too. I'm just gonna give you this stuff. If you leave it somewhere, maybe somebody else will read it. But we have a historic talk, which she didn't put the time on, but the building history talk on the 5th in the building, and then we're gonna do a tour through the building.
fun.
And we have,
I love it.
Yes, I heard your.
Art Walk. We have Israel Nebuchar from Blind Pilot playing. We're like,
I read about it in the Daily A.
Cool.
Like a really talented artist did your logo.
Yes, and this really talented artist made us a logo, and they made us a beer.
Who did the logo?
No.
David
Oh,
Coyne.
David Coyne.
He's a brewer at the Fort George, and he designs a lot of the bottle labels, and he's my boyfriend.
All right.
Just saying.
Good kind of
Really talented fellow.
Right? He's good at art. And he made a beer that they're going to do a beer release at the Fort George too on the 19th, and it's a whiskey sour inspired barrel aged ale. So it's got lemon peels and cherries in this barrel aged beer. It'll probably be really delicious if you like beer.
Is he showcasing it at the Brew Fest
Yes.
this weekend?
Oh no, it's not at the Brew Fest. It's
Oh.
not opening. It's not
It's
going
got
to
its
be
own
ready
event.
because it's barrel
doing its
aging until the 19th. But this will be on the label for that too.
Oh, this is fun.
And then we have a Halloween party at the Astoria Arts and Movement Center on the 26th. And if you come, you get to double your vote because you can vote in person that day and you can vote online that day. So, and I expect you to be in costume. All of you.
Even if you don't come.
Even if you don't know.
You'll never know.
But please log on and if you
That's
can
the only
remember to vote
outfit
every
Jim
day.
has.
You
Not
address
like
as
that's
Jim
okay,
Nikes.
You think
gotta try.
that's funny? Serpa did that one year.
You're giving me some ideas. I think maybe I need
Okay,
to
so
open up to
She's a smart
I
kid.
have a couple of
Email
quick
accounts.
items.
won't
First
tell.
of all, Dr. Frank Mansfield, who was appointed to this committee but hasn't ever been to one of our meetings, he's resigned. He took a job in Washington DC, so he
Oh,
will
my.
not be commuting back. We've got a good committee here, and most of our committees are 5, and you were 6, so we're not going out for a replacement for him.
Okay.
But we do have openings on the Southwest Coastal and Elsie Jewell Seaside Rural committees that we're advertising for right now.
Boy, I'd like to spy on those Southwest coastal people. Let me say that.
Just show up at one of their meetings. You're more than
You
welcome.
don't
Yeah.
want to.
October and November for our meeting dates. So October, we're scheduled to meet the 24th, but at least myself and Tori are going to be out at a conference. Julia may or may not go. Do you want to reschedule your meeting and maybe push it up a day or two in October, or push it back a day or two to the next week in October? Or do you just want to cancel it?
Early October, I can't.
Okay.
How are we? Well, we don't want to do it on actual Halloween. Not that there's
No,
probably.
not
I
on
mean, we
Halloween.
could because
I draw a line.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, is that your
That's your
threshold.
threshold.
High holy day.
your
Respect
Halloween?
that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I better see you at the dance party then.
I don't dance, but I love
You don't have to. Yeah.
So we could maybe move it up to like the 22nd maybe? That's a Tuesday? Because we'll be leaving on the 23rd and then we'll be out the 23rd, 24th, and 25th.
I can do the 22nd.
I might not be able to.
What's the day of the week?
It's a
That's a
It's a
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
I've got a out-of-town project that may or may not conflict with that.
And it would be
date.
back out here?
Would we be terribly behind schedule if we didn't meet that because there's the other
Well,
meeting that week
You
that I would go
will,
to?
Because then in November, the 4th Thursday is Thanksgiving.
Right.
And then in December, the 4th Thursday is the day after Christmas.
Got it.
So,
Do
So
anything but the first one.
okay. What about are Tuesdays just bad for you, Jim?
No, they're just part of my wife's time off.
Okay.
I never know what I'm going to get scheduled to do.
What about Wednesday, the 30th?
That would
That's doable.
Yeah. Okay.
I could do that.
I'll be gone.
You want to stay at 5 p.m. again?
Yeah.
Sure. Here still?
As far as I know, I'll verify it.
Yeah, this is a good spot. I like the room. It feels, like we deserve to have a lot of space here.
You hear our
I don't
laughs.
want to be cramped.
Should be having a bigger party than we're having.
That's right.
Okay, so then in November, the 4th Thursday is Thanksgiving Day. Do you want to cancel your meeting that month or shift it?
I am
How about-
out of town the first week in December.
How about if we shift to November and skip December?
Okay.
I'm just throwing that out there.
For some reason, I had November in my written as the November meeting on the 21st instead of the 28th. Is that just?
That's the
'cause-
county-wide.
Oh, you're right. Just kidding. Wow.
Do we want to try to do a Monday,
Well, then-
Tuesday of Thanksgiving week? Is anybody all freaked out about, we always host Thanksgiving, so,
I don't go out of town.
yeah.
don't do anything ever, so.
Tuesday would be
You're pretty
good.
much
The
open,
26th
26th?
Is that?
that works for me,
26th is the Tuesday?
of November.
Yeah, that's actually right on our schedule. That's like,
Yeah, it keeps
the
you
number
warm.
sounds
Yeah.
about right.
Yeah, because you would have been the 28th, okay. And then do you want to cancel your December meeting, which would typically be the day after Thanksgiving? Would be the
Christmas.
26th?
Christmas, you mean?
Or-
Yes.
Yeah, Christmas.
Yes,
Yes, okay.
I won't be here for that.
let's cancel it. Let's not,
Christmas is canceled. Got
Christmas.
it.
Okay.
Put that in your calendar.
Write it down.
It's enough.
Can we please? Too much stress.
Yeah, right.
Stress.
All I'm
Everyone
asking is no
relax.
Christmas music until after Thanksgiving. That's
For
all
the
I
love
ask.
of
That's
all
I
that
ask.
is.
Good luck.
That's fair.
Well, I didn't want to go that far. I'm just asking for Thanksgiving.
Otherwise, I'm bringing in my Bob Dylan Christmas CD.
Bob Dylan.
It's scary. You've not been frightened until you heard him singing "Oh Come All You Faithful."
That must be something.
I want to hear it now.
Now I'm just morbidly curious. I know. Play that at Halloween
Play for your,
though.
for your Halloween kids. They come walking up,
Actually.
just like I'm not going there. You hear that music?
Somebody
Shoot, I
want these
forgot that
bags?
I brought a
That's
ton of
all I've got.
napkins for the cheese.
That's funny. That's actually pretty
Sorry,
good.
didn't share them.
Here, we done with my football.
All right, I called, how's everybody doing? Did we all, we get our say? All right, I call this meeting to a close.
Very good.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Let's go see if the Packers are winning.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody for